In May 1945, as the guns of World War II finally fell silent and the ruins of the Third Reich smoldered across Europe, a new battle was already beginning. One fought not with tanks or bombers, but with secrets, intelligence, and science. The Second World War had ended, but a new conflict was rising from its ashes, the Cold War. And in the shadows of that emerging struggle, the United States launched one of the most controversial and secretive operations in its history. It was called Operation Paperclip, a program designed to recruit, protect, and transport hundreds of German scientists, engineers, and weapons specialists to America. Men who had worked for the Nazi war machine, men whose knowledge might determine the future of global power, men the United States could not allow to fall into Soviet hands. But this story begins not in Washington or Moscow, but in the ruins of Germany, where Allied forces uncovered laboratories, bunkers, blueprints, prototypes, and scientists whose work, if captured by the enemy, could tip the balance of the coming decades. In the final months of the war, American intelligence officers were stunned by the scale of German technological development. They found advanced guided missiles, jet aircraft far ahead of anything America had built, chemical weapons, anti-aircraft rockets, and documents hinting at even more ambitious projects. The V-2 rocket, the world's first long-range ballistic missile, had already rained destruction on London, but its technology represented something far more important, a glimpse into the future of warfare and space exploration. The man behind the V-2 program was a young, ambitious engineer named Wernher von Braun, a visionary who dreamed of sending rockets into space long before he built weapons for Hitler. As the war turned against Germany, von Braun and his team at Peenemünde realized they were at risk, not only from Allied bombing, but from the SS, who suspected disloyalty. In early 1945, von Braun made a decision that would shape the post-war world. He gathered his top scientists and fled south, away from the approaching Soviets, ultimately surrendering to American forces in the Bavarian Alps. He knew that if he fell into Soviet hands, his future would be imprisonment or forced labor. Meanwhile, far to the east, the Soviets were advancing rapidly. The Red Army overran Germany's rocket production facilities at Nordhausen, capturing engineers, prototypes, and hundreds of partially assembled V-2 rockets. Stalin immediately launched a massive effort to kidnap or coerce surviving German scientists into working for the Soviet Union. The Cold War had begun even before the last shots of World War II were fired. In Washington, U.S. military and intelligence officials saw the danger clearly. If the Soviets secured Germany's scientific brainpower, they could gain an overwhelming advantage in missile technology, nuclear weapons, and advanced aircraft. America could not let that happen. So the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, the JIOA, proposed something unprecedented: to bring German scientists to the United States, give them new identities, erase their past affiliations, and recruit them into American research programs. The idea was controversial. Many of these men had worked for the Nazi regime. Some had been members of the party. A few had even overseen operations that relied on forced labor. But the Cold War allowed no moral certainty. The question was not whether these men had served the Third Reich, but whether America or the Soviet Union would now claim their knowledge. Thus, Operation Paperclip was born. The name came from the simple act of marking the files of desired scientists with a paperclip. The JIOA began searching across occupied Germany, in towns, bunkers, rural hideouts, and military bases, for specialists in rocketry, aeronautics, chemistry, medicine, physics, and engineering. Hundreds were identified. Many volunteered out of fear of Soviet capture. Others sought protection for their families or simply wanted to continue their work under someone's flag. The U.S. military established secret camps to gather and interrogate these scientists. One of the most important was at Garmisch-Partenkirchen, where von Braun and his rocket team were held. American intelligence combed through their records. Some files showed clear involvement with the Nazi Party, membership often required for career advancement, while others revealed more troubling affiliations. But the military and State Department argued over the ethics of recruiting them. Publicly, the United States condemned Nazi crimes. Privately, it was preparing to hire men who had worked for the regime. So the JIOA took matters into its own hands. Files were cleaned up. Party memberships were minimized or deleted. The paperwork was altered. The paperclips marked which scientists should be cleared quickly. Those selected were quietly transported to the United States on military aircraft, often without public knowledge or congressional approval. Their destination was Fort Bliss, Texas, White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico, and later, the fledgling aerospace facilities that would become the backbone of America's space and missile programs. Von Braun and his rocket team were instructed to reconstruct the technology behind the V-2 rockets, helping American engineers understand and replicate German designs. America had captured dozens of V-2 rockets intact. Now it needed the expertise to operate them. The first tests were crude, but within months, von Braun's team began launching the modified V-2s over the New Mexico desert, gathering data that would ultimately evolve into the Redstone and Jupiter missile programs. These rockets were the foundation of America's early steps into space. Without them, without von Braun, the United States would have fallen behind the Soviet Union during the earliest stages of the space race. But rocket science was only one piece of Operation Paperclip. American intelligence had also recruited aerodynamicists who pioneered swept-wing designs for jet aircraft, chemists who contributed to synthetic fuel research, physicists who studied high-speed aerodynamics, and medical researchers whose wartime experiments, some ethical, others deeply troubling, were now being examined for insights the military believed could save American lives. The ethical debates surrounding Operation Paperclip have never truly ended. Some of the scientists had simply been swept into the Nazi system without ideological commitment. Others had actively benefited from it. But the Cold War reshaped priorities. The Soviet Union was developing its own missile programs using German engineers it had captured. Stalin's scientists began launching test rockets just months after von Braun's team began work in the United States. The arms race was accelerating. In 1949, the Soviets detonated their first atomic bomb, years earlier than Washington expected. Panic spread through the American government. The fear of falling behind drove Operation Paperclip into an even more aggressive phase. Hundreds more German scientists were brought to the United States. Their families followed. Many became American citizens. And then, in 1957, the world changed again. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite in human history. It circled the Earth, beeping its presence into American radios, and the United States realized the consequences of hesitation. While moral debates continued, the Soviets had surged ahead. Suddenly, the question was no longer whether Operation Paperclip had been justified, but whether it had gone far enough. The crisis sparked a massive acceleration of the American space program, and leading it was none other than Wernher von Braun. His team developed the Redstone rocket, then the Jupiter C, and finally the mighty Saturn V, the rocket that would carry Apollo astronauts to the moon. In 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, it was atop a machine created by the German engineer who had once built weapons for Hitler. Operation Paperclip had reshaped history. Yet the legacy of the operation remains complex. It advanced American science by decades. It helped the United States win the space race. It gave birth to NASA's golden age. But it also required uncomfortable compromises. It blurred the line between justice and necessity, and it forced the United States to confront a difficult truth that in the aftermath of World War II, morality was often overshadowed by fear of Soviet power. Today, historians continue to debate the ethics of Operation Paperclip. Some argue that the United States should never have recruited men with connections to the Nazi regime. Others believe that without their knowledge, the Soviet Union would have gained technological superiority, with consequences far more dangerous. But one fact is undeniable. Operation Paperclip stands as one of the most important, controversial, and transformative intelligence programs of the 20th century. It is a story of ambition and fear, science and secrecy, ethics and survival. A story that began in the ashes of the Second World War and shaped the Cold War that followed. You've been watching WW2 War Files, where the hidden operations and forgotten chapters of World War II come to light. If this story gave you a new look at the war's aftermath, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another episode. And tell us in the comments, do you believe Operation Paperclip was a necessary decision, or